The story of humanity, as we are commonly taught, is a grand, sweeping narrative of natural selection and gradual evolution. It begins in the sun-drenched savannas of Africa, with hominids slowly rising from 4 legs to 2, their brains expanding over millions of years, mastering fire, crafting tools, and eventually spreading across the globe to build the civilizations we know today. This is the scientific consensus, a story written in the fossil record and our own genetic code. It is a powerful and compelling tale. But what if it is only part of the story? What if another, far older and more dramatic account has been hiding in plain sight, dismissed as myth and allegory, yet holding the keys to our true, forgotten Genesis? This account is found in the opening pages of the Old Testament. For centuries, we have been conditioned to read the book of Genesis as a purely religious or metaphorical text. Creation in 7 days, a talking serpent, a man formed from dust, a woman from a rib, a global flood, a tower that angers God. To the modern, rational mind, these are fables, primitive attempts to explain a world that science has since illuminated. But if we suspend our disbelief for a moment and read it not as theology, but as a highly condensed and perhaps distorted historical record, a startling picture begins to emerge. A picture that, intriguingly, finds echoes in the oldest recorded histories of other civilizations and even aligns with certain geological and archaeological anomalies. Let us begin with the very first line. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The Hebrew word used for God here is Elohim. This is a grammatical peculiarity that scholars have long debated, because Elohim is a plural noun. A more literal translation would be, in the beginning, the gods created the heavens and the earth. Why the plural? Was this a simple linguistic quirk, or a remnant of an older polytheistic tradition that was later edited into a monotheistic framework? This question becomes profoundly significant when we turn our gaze from ancient Israel to the Fertile Crescent of Mesopotamia, to the civilization of Sumer. The Sumerians, who emerged seemingly out of nowhere around 4500 BC in what is now Iraq, possessed a startlingly advanced culture. They invented writing, the wheel, the 60-minute hour, the 360-degree circle, and had a sophisticated understanding of astronomy. Their cuneiform tablets, baked in clay and preserved for millennia, tell their own creation story. They speak of a race of powerful beings who came from the heavens, whom they called the Anunnaki, which translates to those who from heaven to earth came. According to Sumerian texts like the Enuma Elish, these Anunnaki came to earth in search of a precious resource, possibly gold, which they needed to repair the atmosphere of their home planet, Nibiru. The labor was grueling, and the lower-ranking Anunnaki eventually rebelled against the toil. To solve this labor crisis, their chief scientist, a being named Enki, proposed a solution. They would create a primitive worker, a slave race, to do the mining for them. The texts describe how Enki and the chief medical officer, Ninti, took an existing hominid on Earth, what we might call Homo erectus or a similar ancestor, and upgraded its genetic makeup. They mixed the clay of the earth with the essence of the Anunnaki and implanted it into a surrogate mother. The result was the first human, whom they called the Adamu. The parallels to the Genesis account are impossible to ignore. A plural group of divine beings, the Elohim Anunnaki. The creation of the first man, Adam, Adamo, from the clay of the earth. The breath of life breathed into Adam by God could be seen as an allegory for the activation of consciousness, the switching on of the advanced genetic code. Genesis states that man was made in our image, after our likeness. This was not a metaphor for moral character, but perhaps a literal statement of genetic engineering. Humanity was created as a hybrid, bearing the genetic signature of our earthly ancestors and our cosmic creators. This reinterpretation casts the Garden of Eden in a new light. Was it a mystical paradise, or something more tangible? The Old Testament describes it as a specific geographical location, with 4 rivers flowing from it, 2 of which are the Tigris and the Euphrates, the very heartland of ancient Sumer. Perhaps Eden was not a garden for humanity's pleasure, but a controlled environment, a biosphere or a laboratory where the newly created humans were kept and observed. They were given a simple command: they could enjoy all the fruits of the garden, but were forbidden to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The serpent, a creature often associated with wisdom and healing in ancient cultures, persuades Eve to disobey. In the Sumerian narrative, the serpent figure is none other than Enki, the very scientist who created humanity. Enki often sympathized with his creation, seeing them as more than just slaves. He was in constant conflict with his half-brother, Enlil, the stern commander of the Earth mission, who saw humans as a problem to be managed. Could the serpent in Genesis be a symbolic representation of a dissenting faction among the Elohim Anunnaki, one that wished to give humanity the gift of self-awareness and the ability to procreate on its own? When Adam and Eve ate the fruit, their eyes were opened. They gained knowledge, self-awareness, and shame. They became conscious. And what is the reaction of the Elohim? It is not one of a loving father disappointed in his children. It is one of fear and alarm. Genesis 3:22 states, "And the Lord God said, Behold, the man has become like one of us, to know good and evil. And now lest he put out his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat, and live forever." They were not punished for a moral failing. They were exiled because they were becoming too much like their creators. They had achieved consciousness, and the next step, symbolized by the tree of life, was biological immortality, or at least a vastly extended lifespan. Just like the Anunnaki, who were said to live for thousands of years, the expulsion from Eden was a quarantine. Humanity, now self-aware and breeding uncontrollably, was cast out into the wilderness to fend for itself, severed from the direct technology and presence of its creators. What follows in the biblical narrative is a long period of human history where lifespans are recorded as being extraordinarily long. Adam lives for 930 years, Seth for 912, Methuselah for 969. This is often dismissed as symbolic, but what if it isn't? What if the first generations of genetically engineered humans retained a portion of their creator's longevity, a trait that was slowly diluted over successive generations as they interbred and moved further from the original genetic template? The Old Testament also speaks of a strange and cryptic event in Genesis 6. The sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. These sons of God, the Nephilim, are described as giants and mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Was this a memory of the Anunnaki themselves, or a designated ruling class interbreeding with the human population, creating hybrid bloodlines that would go on to become the kings and heroes of ancient myth? This period of chaotic expansion and intermingling comes to an abrupt and catastrophic end with the Great Flood. Again, the story of a world-destroying deluge is not unique to the Bible. It is one of the most universal myths in human culture. The Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh contains a strikingly similar story of a man named Utnapishtim, who is warned by the god Enki of an impending flood planned by the enraged Enlil, who was fed up with the noise and clamor of the burgeoning human population. Enki instructs Utnapishtim to build a massive boat, a preserver of life, and to take his family, craftsmen, and the seed of all living things aboard. The storm rages for 6 days and 6 nights, wiping out all of humanity. When the waters recede, Utnapishtim's boat lands on a mountain, and he releases a dove, just as Noah does in the biblical account. The parallels are too precise to be a coincidence. It is now widely accepted that the Hebrew story of Noah is a later version of the much older Sumerian original. But this doesn't mean the event didn't happen. It suggests that a cataclysmic flood was such a profound and traumatic event in the collective memory of ancient peoples that it became a cornerstone of their history. For a long time, science dismissed the idea of a global flood, but recent discoveries have forced a reevaluation. One compelling theory is the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. Around 12,800 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, evidence suggests that a comet or asteroid fragmented and struck the North American ice sheet. The impact would have been apocalyptic, triggering continent-spanning wildfires, a nuclear winter that plunged the world back into ice age conditions for over 1,000 years, and, most importantly, causing the catastrophic melting of vast glaciers. This would have resulted in a sudden and dramatic rise in global sea levels, inundating coastal regions around the world where the majority of early human settlements were likely located. Entire civilizations could have been wiped from the face of the earth, leaving only scattered, traumatized survivors to pass down the story of a world washed clean by the gods. Another, more localized but equally devastating theory is the Black Sea Deluge hypothesis. Geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman proposed that around 7,500 years ago, the Mediterranean Sea, swollen by meltwater from the retreating glaciers, breached the natural dam at the Bosporus Strait. Water poured into the Black Sea Basin, which was then a smaller freshwater lake, with the force of 200 Niagara Falls. The sea level in the basin rose by hundreds of feet, flooding over 60 square miles of land in a matter of months, and displacing all the peoples who lived along its fertile shores. These refugees would have scattered across Europe and Asia, carrying with them the terrifying memory of the flood. In this context, Noah's Ark takes on a new meaning. Was it a literal wooden boat filled with pairs of every animal on Earth, or was it an allegory for something more technologically advanced? In the Sumerian version, Enki, the master scientist, provides the blueprint. Could the Ark have been a genetic repository, a vessel, perhaps not even a boat but a secure bunker, containing the DNA embryos and seeds, the seed of all living things needed to repopulate the world after the disaster? Noah and his family were not just random survivors. They were chosen custodians of a genetic legacy, tasked by a sympathetic faction of the gods with preserving the human experiment. After the flood, humanity begins again from a single family, a single location. Genesis 11 describes the next major event, the Tower of Babel. The descendants of Noah, all speaking one language, settle in the land of Shinar, another name for summer. They decide to build a city and a tower whose top may reach into heaven, to make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. Again, the traditional interpretation is that this was an act of human arrogance, an attempt to physically build a tower to God's level. But this makes little sense. Ancient people were not so naive. What if the tower was not about physical height, but about knowledge and technology? What if it was an attempt to re-establish the science and power of the pre-flood world, to reach into heaven not by climbing, but by mastering astronomy, communication, or perhaps even space travel, to contact or challenge their creators? It was a unified project of a resurgent, intelligent humanity. And once again, the reaction of the Elohim is one of fear. Genesis 11:6, and the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. This is a stunning admission of human potential. The creators realize that a unified humanity is an unstoppable force. Their solution is not destruction, but division. Let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. The confounding of the tongues was not a magical curse that instantly made people speak different languages. It was likely a deliberate, strategic act of social engineering. The Elohim, Anunnaki, forcibly scattered the population, breaking up the unified culture of Mesopotamia and seeding new, distinct civilizations across the globe. By introducing different languages, customs, and religions, they ensured humanity would forever be divided, prone to conflict, and incapable of uniting to challenge their authority. It was the ultimate act of control, creating a planetary quarantine of warring tribes. ensuring we would spend our energy fighting each other rather than looking to the stars and questioning our own origins. From this perspective, the Old Testament transforms from a collection of fables into a grand, terrifying tapestry of our own forgotten history. It chronicles our creation as a genetically engineered worker race, our awakening to consciousness, our quarantine after becoming a perceived threat, our near extinction in a global cataclysm, and our final, deliberate fracturing as a species to keep us manageable. This is not to say that every word of the Bible should be taken literally. The text has been edited, translated, and reinterpreted for millennia, its original meaning clouded by religious dogma and cultural bias. But the core narrative, the sequence of events, remains. And this sequence finds too many echoes in other ancient records and aligns too neatly with certain scientific and archaeological puzzles to be dismissed out of hand. We are a species with amnesia. We are haunted by stories of gods who walked among us, of a golden age, of a paradise lost, and of a devastating flood. We build pyramids and megalithic structures with an astronomical precision that baffles modern engineering. We are driven by an insatiable curiosity, a relentless urge to explore, to understand, to reach for the heavens. Could this be the echo of our own genetic programming, a deep-seated memory of our creators and our true potential? The story written in the Old Testament may not be the word of a single, omnipotent God. It may be the highly condensed and filtered history of our relationship with our creators, a powerful, technologically advanced, and deeply divided alien race who made us in their image and have been controlling our destiny from the shadows ever since. The truth of our origin may not be buried in the African dust alone, but also hidden within the cryptic verses of the world's most influential book, waiting for a generation with the courage to read it not as a prayer, but as a chronicle.